Welcome to Detective Risk's office. Today, we're diving into the mystery of the environmental risk assessment, a puzzle every preventive medicine board taker needs to solve. See this magnifying glass? It's not just decoration, it's your investigative tool. Every object here holds a clue about hazards, exposures, and the steps we take to figure out who might be at risk. Let's start by uncovering the hazards themselves. The case won't solve itself. First, a green chemical flask appears on the desk. This is set to remind us of chemical hazards, including things like lead, pesticides, or industrial solvents, hidden dangers that can contaminate water, soil, or air. Next, a megaphone jumps into view to remind us of physical hazards, loud noises, radiation, extreme temperatures. These are all physical hazards, like chronic noise in factories, UV radiation from the sun, or extreme heat waves. Shortly after, green microbes appear under the magnifying glass. Tiny but dangerous biological hazards from bacteria like salmonella, viruses like influenza, or allergens such as mold spores. Each clue tells us something about what can cause harm. Now that we know what we're dealing with, the next question is, how do they get from the environment to us? A plate suddenly drops onto the table. There's a handprint in the food, our first route of exposure, dermal contact, showing hazards that touch the skin, like pesticide residues on vegetables or chemicals spilled on factory floors, or even mosquito bites. Steam rises from the plate, inhalation, another route of exposure, pollutants sneaking in through the air like smoke from wildfires, industrial fumes, or airborne viruses. And the food itself, that's ingestion, contaminated meals, or water carrying chemical hazards like lead, biological hazards like E. coli, or even naturally occurring toxins. Following these paths is like following footprints at a crime scene, but hazards and exposures are just part of the mystery. Next, we need to uncover the situations that trigger a full blown risk assessment. Up top, a sign reads Evidence Board Risky Situations, our guide to knowing when a formal investigation is needed. From left to right, the clues appear. A masked face. This represents population level hazards like an outbreak of measles or a contaminated water supply, when an entire community could be affected. A thorough risk assessment helps public health officials figure out the scope and urgency of the threat. A government building, this stands for policy or regulatory decisions. Agencies often need solid evidence before setting safety standards, like permissible air pollution levels or approving chemicals for use. Risk assessments provide the data to make informed, protective regulations. A cloudy flask with a question mark. This symbolizes uncertainty. Sometimes safe exposure limits aren't clear, such as with a new industrial chemical or an emerging contaminant. A risk assessment is critical here to estimate potential harm even when data is incomplete. A fire. Fire shows emerging environmental threats like wildfires, chemical spills, or climate driven heat waves. When new hazards appear, a risk assessment helps determine the potential danger and guides how to respond quickly. A barrier with dollar signs. This represents costly or controversial interventions. Actions like replacing all lead pipes in a city or banning a pesticide require careful evaluation because the costs and trade offs are high. A risk assessment ensures that interventions are justified and effective. These clues show us when and why a risk assessment is necessary to protect populations, support policy decisions, address uncertainty, respond to new threats, and evaluate high stakes interventions. With this understanding, we're ready to piece everything together in the final framework. Let's connect the dots. The desk shows hazards and how they reach people. The evidence board shows the situations that matter. And now we add the final clue, the red book. to remind us of the Red Book framework. This is a conceptual model used for evaluating environmental health risks. It breaks down the investigation into four key steps: HUNT, which stands for hazard identification, spot what can cause harm, chemicals, biological agents, or physical threats; examine, which stands for exposure assessment, determine who or what is exposed and by which pathways, ingestion, inhalation, or dermal contact; determine, which stands for dose response assessment. Figure out how the risk changes depending on the level or duration of exposure. Review, which stands for risk characterization. Summarize the overall risk, weighing severity, likelihood, and populations affected. Keep these visual clues and steps in mind. They're your detective tools for solving environmental risk assessment mysteries, both for the boards and real world cases. Every icon, every pathway, every step. Now the mystery is solved.